Fun question here about Mongo from Jason Scott. He says, does Arn know about Mongo putting women on scholarships? How wild was it traveling with Mongo?
Well, I never did travel with Mongo, to be honest with you. Mongo was his own cat. He did his own thing. And, man, I just loved Mongo. He looked at me and he said, Arn, I just got divorced. I had 10 million left over from my football days. I gave her 5. I've got 5. When I quit having fun doing the wrestling thing or the 5 million runs out first, I'm out of here. And that's just the way he was. He did his own late night partying. Mongo didn't have any office meetings he had to attend or anything else. Mongo just kind of did his own thing. And, man, he's about as wild as it comes. Matter of fact, one of the last times we saw Mongo, we were working Philadelphia. He ended up going to a strip joint there, and we didn't see him for 2 weeks. So that's the God's truth.
Oh, my gosh. Late to the Nitro Party has another great question here. This one about Paul Roma. He says, the guy always seemed like a good worker, but just could never break through. Do you have any good Paul Roma stories?
Well, I mean, Paul was in a rough spot. He was brought into a situation where expectations were still pretty high for what a member of the Horsemen was supposed to be, what the thought process was, how he would add to the group. And, that decision was made by someone entirely nothing to do with any of the participants, myself or Rick or anybody else, Rolly. So, everybody had their own reason for doing what they did. It was a good spot for him, but I don't think he ever really enjoyed it or felt comfortable in it. And I thought he made a much better partner for Paul Orndorff, and they had a nice little run when ours was over. So, hey, it's not up to me to judge, who was a good horseman, who wasn't. I think it's ultimately up to the test of time and the fans themselves to decide who they liked in that role, what group of horsemen were their favorites, which were their least favorites. And I had no problem. I could do business with anybody.
I don't think I've ever heard you talk about this next question. Jimmy Steven writes in, do you have any memories of working with the Dynamite Kid? Anything about his personality or backstage stories that you can share? I don't think you guys were together in the same locker room for very long, just for a cup of coffee in the WWF. Was there another time you were around Dynamite Kid?
No, we worked with those guys about 2 or 3 times when we first got there. And it was just live events, I think. So, I had heard all the stories, and I know Barry Darsow with Demolition, was very good friends with Davey Boy and Dynamite. And they spoke very highly of those guys. I know they worked with them a lot. And, I enjoyed, they were very, very talented. Tully and I enjoyed working with them. And those few times we got to, but we were never anywhere that they were prior to that or after that, other than I'm talking about just Dynamite. So it was very, very short experience with him.
You got to think it's going to happen eventually. Alex S. Pumpkins wants to know, did Arn ever have a chance to wrestle any of the Von Erichs?
Nope. I missed those guys. They were on top when I first broke in, and I passed them a couple times in Bill Watts' locker rooms. Once or twice, I think I saw them somewhere along the way. Maybe we were in Texas, and Jim Crockett might have used those guys for something for Dallas. I'm not quite positive about it, but I was only around them a couple times. Sorry I missed them. Would have loved to have worked with them in Dallas when they were red hot, because at one point in time, they were as hot as anybody in the business.
Interesting question here from South Sox fan down south. He says, when you first came to the Mid-Atlantic area, you were always wearing a Yankees hat on TV. Were you a fan of the Yankees, or was it just for heat?
Both. I was a fan of Reggie Jackson and Goose Gossage and the times was 75 or whatever those years were that they prevailed when they were really kicking ass. I'm more of a personality fan. You know, I love the Raiders back in the heyday, Snake Stabler and that crew. My God, when they were kicking ass. You know, even though I lived in Rome at the time, I should have been pulling for the Falcons. I was never a Falcons fan. I was more of a personality fan. But, you know, just the whole concept of being from Rome, Georgia, and being Southern as you could possibly be, but wearing a New York Yankees hat, to me, just really pissed me off when I first even thought about it. I just saw a hat laying somewhere in a store, like a sporting goods store, and I said, damn, that, you know what, that just might work. And I just bought it and put it on because I knew as soon as I started talking, when you're pushing something in those days, you know, from New York, and you were in a Southern territory, man, that was traitor written all over it. So seemed to work. People are talking about it 30 years later. So apparently somebody remembered something about it they didn't like, which was what I was pushing for at the time.